Thank you, Carl, Galliant Few. We are humbled to be here and have this opportunity to speak with y'all, and I want to thank everybody that's put their time and their effort and their money into making this movement, this event happen. It really is an amazing thing that everyone's doing. Before we start on our journey and talk about how we got to where we are today, we have something that we want you to think about at the beginning, and at the end, we're going to circle back to it, and we're going to ask you to share. It is important if you could please share, or else you're just going to take all of the air out of our balloon at the end of this. So I'm going to let my wife go over that with you.
Good morning. Okay. I want you, for just a couple of minutes, to reflect on a recent event that caused conflict between you and someone else, or you and a group of people. It can be something personal, like with your spouse, girlfriend, child. It can be in the workplace where you've had conflict. It could be a stupid online debate about politics that you got really out of hand. Whatever, I want you, and it can be small, but just go ahead and start reflecting on that situation, how it went down, how you felt in that moment, and what happened afterwards. So just take a moment to think about it. You can jot it down, you can write it down. And then I also want you to think about how the other person reacted, or people reacted in that situation. What was their response to it? So just take a couple minutes to do that.
All right, hope everyone doesn't mind. We chose to sit, especially since there's one microphone, instead of awkwardly standing next to each other, passing back and forth. So I came to 1st Ranger Battalion in the fall of 2006. And when I arrived, I was an angry, confused young man that was looking for adventure. I had no purpose in life. I just knew that there was a great adventure out there at war, and I wanted to be a part of it. And for a young man that's struggling with those things, Ranger Battalion is it. There's no other place that's going to take all of those frustrations and aggressions that you have and hone them into a purpose that serves something greater than yourself. And I was sold. I mean, I completely immersed myself in that culture. And despite all the yelling and the belittling and all of that kind of indoctrination that you go through to prove your worth as they desensitize you and get you ready for war, that was it for me. I knew this is what I was meant to be doing, and that's all that I cared about. With all the good that comes in that community and that camaraderie, there are plenty of negative aspects to it. When you are preparing a young man for war, you are not, or we are not, concerned about how is he going to be as a father? How well is he going to communicate with his children? Are these communication styles that we're teaching, that we're exposing them to, is that going to make them a better spouse? You know, I had one focus, whether it was when I was young or when I was a leader, and I'm going to prepare this person to be a better gunfighter. And they did that for me. I learned so many incredible leadership traits, and I saw so many incredible men, and it's very inspiring. But once again, there's a flip side to all of that, and there is an entire different element socially that comes outside of work. And it's very unique because that work and social life is completely meshed into one. As we were sitting talking, I realized that in 12 years at Ranger Battalion, I made 2 friends outside of the organization. 2. That was it. My entire world revolved around the men that I worked with. And we worked hard. When we got off work, we also partied hard. And I was spending 3-4 nights a week downtown in the bars, drinking with friends, fighting, partying. And I had absolutely no concern for the future. The only thing that mattered was 3 months later, I'm deploying again. So when I met Mary Elaine, I was 2 deployments in with 1st Ranger Battalion. I was a Tab Spec 4, and my life was a mess. And like a typical weekend, I was wandering around downtown drunk, and I saw the most beautiful woman that I had ever seen sitting on a bench across the way. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to go to sleep tonight without talking to her. So that's who I was when she met me, and I'll let her share more about who she was when we first met.
So I grew up in a military family. My father actually just retired after 33 years as a colonel, and I thought I was very familiar with what it meant to be a military dependent, to be a part of that family, to be growing up in that. But I was not prepared. I also wanted nothing to do with it. After I left home, I just thought, I'm not going to marry anyone in the military. I don't want any part of that. Like, I love America. I'm proud of what my father did, but I just didn't want to put myself through what my mother went through, and what I didn't want my kids to go through, what I went through as a child. So, and I grew up in a military town. And I was surrounded by military men, but I did not date anyone in the military. And when Brett met me, I also was going through perhaps one of the lowest points of my life. I was 21 years old. I had already made a lot of bad decisions. I was that rebellious middle child for my family, and I had no clue what my purpose was, how to even process my own personal trauma that I went through, and where to go. So, what does most 21 lost souls do? What he was doing. We go out and we party. We party all our worries away. We just drink, we have fun, we forget about all the stuff we're going through. And I was sitting on a bench under a tree, angry, annoyed. I actually wasn't drunk when you met me, but I was ready to go home, and I was there with a friend, and she was arguing with her ex in the middle of City Market downtown, and I was just sitting there very vulnerable and exposed and alone under a tree, and I see this. It's like, oh, there's my chance. So anyway, I see him walk up to me, and I'm just like, great. And he comes and he walks up to me and he just looks so concerned, like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just sitting here in this tree. And so I tell him what's going on. I'm like, my friend's arguing, like, I'm good. Like, thank you, bye. And if there's one thing Brett has, it's persistence, okay? So he wasn't just going to let me dismiss him that easily, and he kept going, pushing on and talking, and we were chatting, and then my friend walks up to me and says, all right, it's time to go home. And I said, well, hold up. I'm hungry. Like, I'm not going home without some pizza. So we hit up the local pizza place, and it's the only place at that time that was open late at night. And the line was wrapped around the corner out to the street, just super long line. And of course I was complaining because at that point I was hangry. It was late. This guy is still tagging along with us. He was like, I'm hungry too, actually. So I'm complaining, and he says, you know what? I'm going to get you that pizza, and I'm going to get it within 2 minutes. And if I do that for you, what would you go to dinner with me? And I thought, well, this is an interesting little bargain here. Maybe that's a good problem. Yeah, you feed me once, yeah, you can feed me again later. That's fine. So he does. He cuts the whole entire line, and he's out the door within 2 minutes. Pizza for me, pizza for my friend, pizza for himself, and I think he bought 10 other people pizza.
Expensive pizza I ever bought.
In line. And he walks out, and he was so proud. And he was like, I got you. It's 2 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, I'm still thinking about that dinner. We'll see. So we're just standing out there, outside in the corner of this little intersection, and he's literally leaning on the glass window of this pizza place, and we're just talking and chit-chat. And, in the conversation, he brings up that he is military. And again, I'm just like, great. And this creepy man walks up to me and my friend and just starts being real obnoxious, just hitting on us and just being real creepy, right? And Brett's observing. He's just watching, eating, bites, still leaning on the wall, just eating bites of pizza, watching this go down. And finally, he just says, hey, man, I don't think they're interested. And with zero hesitation, the guy decks Brett in the face. Fist to nose. His head hit it was like that. And in a split second, that turned into a brawl in the middle of Congress Street. I am not, traffic stops. All of these young guys just jump out of nowhere. I mean, they just appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the street, and they're all on top of this dude and his buddies. And I'm just standing there watching this go down. I'm like, what is happening? What is going on? And then the ambulance comes, and then I hear police sirens come, and I'm like, this is getting a little out of hand. And Brett emerges right around when the sirens come on. He emerges out of the crowd. His sandals are gone. I mean, he has no shoes on his feet. His shirt is ripped. He's bloody from head to toe. He's like, we got to go. And I'm like, we got to go. No, you don't understand. I got to go. I can lose my job. Like, this is bad. This is really bad. We got to go. And my friend, Sarah, looks at me and she's like, all right, I'm going to go get my car. Y'all go meet me in the back alleyway. And I'm like, what? But, and I go. Like an idiot. I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go in this dark back alleyway with this guy I just met maybe an hour ago and get our getaway car. Cool, that's a great idea. So I go with him to a back alleyway, and he's standing there, no shoes on his feet. Bloody head to toe. And we're just awkwardly standing there waiting for my friend to go get her car. And it was just really quiet. And he looks at me and he's like, so, how about that dinner? I was just like, you are crazy. I'm not going to go to dinner with you. I'm going to take you home and goodbye, So Sarah comes, we get in the car, we go, we take him back to the barracks. And he asked for my number right when he was about to get out of the car. He's like, can I at least have your number? And, I did feel a little bit guilty. This guy just took a punch to the face and all, okay. I gave him my number, and we've been talking to each other ever since. And I should have known. That should have been some kind of sign from God that said, Mary Elaine, this is probably a bad idea. You should probably just not go there, But that's not what happened.
So this is us now. We still live in Savannah, Georgia. We have a daughter, Belen, who is 9?
She's 8.
8. And our son, Kellen, who is 5. And this is a recent picture from our vow renewal, and it's one of my favorite pictures because, honestly, we look like we have it all together. And a picture doesn't really justify the road that it takes to get places. This is more of an accurate picture of who we were. So that path pretty much continued. I deployed a few weeks after we met, and we kept in contact, and we came back, and I came back from deployment with money in my pocket ready to burn, and that's what we did. We ate great restaurants, we drank, we had a great time, and we fought constantly because we were not in a mature enough position to have a healthy relationship. And the only communication style that I really knew was what I had at work. And it just does not help with a healthy relationship.
Yeah, and the only way that I knew how to deal with the conflict and deal with these arguments, I had 2 modes, fight or flight. And I learned really quick, fighting was not really gonna work. And that was not the best outcome for me. But running away, that always worked.
And when she says fight or flight, literally, we would get in an argument, I would turn, and I'd turn back around, and she would be gone. She would run.
Like the middle of the street, I would just go. Bye.
And that's how we spent a very dysfunctional training cycle. And, it's funny, we don't even look at it as years back then. It's training cycles, deployments. And we continued that toxic situation. And then right before I went on the next deployment, we were probably in the most unstable position that we had been in yet. There's no certainty in our future whether or not we would continue our relationship. We continued to talk over that deployment. And then we had a bomb drop. I call Mary Elaine a few weeks into deployment, and she tells me that she's pregnant. And I'll let you start off with how that affected you.
I was going into my senior year of my undergrad in theater, and I found out I was pregnant, and I felt a lot of feelings that a lot of young, completely unprepared females feel, and that was I was scared out of my mind. I was terrified to tell my family. My family didn't even really know Brett. They wanted nothing to do with him. My friends wanted nothing to do with him because they had seen how toxic we were together. And I was devastated, absolutely devastated, and had no clue where to go from there. And I waited painfully long for him to finally call me. I couldn't just call him because you can't do that. So waited for him to call me, and I was just sobbing on the phone, just, I can't what's happening, my life is over, I'm pregnant, blah, blah. And Brett was oddly calm. I mean, just, it's okay. Like, no, oh yeah, that's awesome. Like, we got this, that's great. And I was, that just made me even more confused. Why I'm freaking out. Why aren't you freaking out? This is terrible. We don't even really like each other. Like, what are we going to do?
And, I had a different mindset every deployment. Things back home just kind of stood still. And for me, it was like, well, I'm not real sure I'm going to survive my 20s anyway. So now at the very least, if something happens to me, my mom has somebody to love and I have somebody to carry on. And I didn't quite get the gravity of what it was going to be like to be a father. And I think that's pretty normal. So come back from that deployment, and we continue just this toxic cycle where we can't communicate, we can't get on the same page. We loved each other, we also hated each other, and but the baby was coming. And it wasn't until I actually saw our daughter born, and then it all hit me at once, right? It's not real to me until I physically see her. And for me, my daughter saved my life. It was the first time in my life where I really had to take a hard look. And it gave me a motivation to change. I didn't know how to be a father yet, but I was lucky enough to have two parents who set a fantastic example, and I knew that I needed to start changing things. And the first thing that I decided was I should probably stop spending all my time in bars. And that was the first major step, I would say, into me trying to become a better man and thinking of something outside of my job, because that's all that mattered to me at that point in time.
So while he was working on bettering himself to be a better father, of course, I had to think, how am I going to provide stability and, be the mom that I want to be and that my child needs for me to be. And I also grew up in a great home, and thankfully had amazing role models. But I had to get my life on track, and I knew I had to go on a different career path. I probably couldn't travel the country trying to audition everywhere and, that crazy dream. And I had to reroute everything. So I pursued my master's in education. I went full-time for 2 years, and for those 2 years of me completely focusing on our daughter, Belen, and finishing my education to be on track to be a teacher, it forced me to mature, as having children hopefully does for everyone. You grow up, you have to be the adult now. And honestly, seeing Brett from day one, he stepped into that father role and took it very seriously, and that kind of softened my heart to him again, as well as to see, okay, wow, he does have these amazing qualities, and he is a man of integrity and compassion and respect and love. And seeing him change, it took years, took about 2 years of changing. It wasn't easy. We went through another, year and a half of craziness, roller coaster again. And but it happened. That shift happened. It changed both of us. And the possibility of maybe we could make this work seemed, there was hope. There was a little sliver of hope again for us. And it wasn't that Belen having a child brought us together. It was just a motivation of, when she is 16 years old, can we look her in the eyes and say, we gave it all we had?
So after another long period of hurting each other and toxicity, we finally just got tired. We were tired of fighting. We were tired of the path we had taken, and we decided we were going to go all or nothing. We were either going to make it work or we were going to burn it to the ground. We went to counseling, and that first started opening up a little bit of a communication avenue for us. And we decided to jump in. And 3 days before I deployed again, I proposed to Mary Elaine. She said yes. And once again, I left, and I left her to figure things out. I had moved out of my apartment. We decided we were going to live together. So here's this new baby. Go find us an apartment, and I'll see you in a few months. We entered a good period after that, the best period we had had in a long time. There was about a year and a half where we kind of went on autopilot. And to be honest with you, I don't remember a lot of that period because it wasn't marked with trauma. And then something happened. I sustained a knee injury that ended up resulting in my medical retirement years later, but it forced me to be home a lot more than I'd ever been. We did 7 deployments together over the course of about 8 years, and I just was not constantly home. But now I was. I missed a few deployments, and things started bubbling up from before because we hadn't really dealt with a lot of these things. We had just tried to move past them. And all of a sudden, there were issues that I was having, on edge constantly, the anxiousness, the irritability, and that all started kind of erupting into poor communication once again. And we were fighting, and we hit a climax. I was given the opportunity at work to go to school full-time for a semester. I didn't have to report to work. It was a time to be with family and relax and decompress, and it actually had the opposite effect. We were together so much that it exacerbated the issues. And it was never anything violent or physical. We just argued, and I was experiencing emotions and feelings that I did not understand. And the climax came when, after a fight, Mary Elaine took the kids and she left. And I remember sitting in the living room, staring at the mirror over our mantel, and I was crying uncontrollably. I didn't know why. I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't understand the feelings that were going on inside of me, but I knew that despite everything I had tried, I may be losing my family. And it was the biggest gut shot I've ever experienced in my life. Mary Elaine gave me an ultimatum. She said, you will go to counseling and you will find help. If you do, we will stay here. We will be by your side and we will support you. But she knew that she could not help me. And that's the tricky thing for the spouse and the soldier. They don't necessarily prepare you for these things. There's these ideas, right? There's these words, PTSD, anxiety, but that doesn't really capture what's going on. So she wasn't prepared for what was going on, and neither was I. And, I went and sat in a counselor's office a few days later and, describing what had happened. Like, I'm so confused, I don't understand. And he was like, I can tell you exactly what had happened. You had an anxiety attack. I don't think you understand, Doc. Like, I'm a gunfighter. I don't have anxiety. But how was I going to tell my wife what's going on when I couldn't even tell? I didn't even know myself. And that turned into a period of some self-awareness that I had never experienced before. And I wish I could sit here and tell you that if you go to counseling, it's just going to get better overnight. That is not what I experienced. What I experienced was, as I started identifying these things and shedding light on these things, it got a lot worse. And I remember sitting around many times asking Mary Elaine, I feel like I'm getting so much worse. Have I always been this way, or is this a new thing? And her answer was always the same. This has been going on for a very long time. But self-awareness is everything.
Yes, and I told you earlier, I had 2 modes, fight or flight. And flight was easier with our conflict because I knew there was nothing I could say that would make the situation better. It would just be a constant vicious cycle, right, if we kept it going. So that turned into also kind of a coping mechanism for me over the years is why address issues? So I didn't. I mean, people said, oh, you're so easygoing. Like, you just let everything just fly right by you. And I'm like, yeah, I have to. Like, that's how I cope. I ignore the issues because it's not wise for me to address them. And as he was uncovering these issues for himself and asking me these very pointed questions for the first time in years since I met him, I felt like a fish out of water having to answer these. Is he actually going to listen to what I have to say and receive it well? So it was so uncomfortable for me to verbalize, that's always been happening. And yes, that has been an issue, or yes, that is reality. It was.
So I began to work on me, and that once again enabled an opportunity for us to begin to grow again. And we learned a few things as we kind of pulled ourselves once again off the ground. And we'd like to share those things with you. The first thing was I accepted what was in my own life, and Mary Elaine accepted who I was. She accepted me for who I was, and she met me where I was. It wasn't where I should be, or the man that I should be, or the father I should be. We started with where I was. And once you come to that common ground, traction can occur.
Yes, and I think meeting you where you were and you meeting me where I was at also, there was a level of resentment, I think, over the years where I couldn't accept it. Like, this is who he was today. And having that built, that resentment over the years, I had to let go of that. I had to accept it. This is what we're dealing with right now, and I cannot be angry at you for how you are.
So the next thing is having the courage to confront an issue, but then also having the courage to be vulnerable. I had never allowed myself to be vulnerable to my wife or anybody else because that's not the environment we had grown up in. There's no use for that in war. And Ranger Battalion was concerned about one thing, preparing people for war, and that's what I lived. So the idea of being vulnerable in any state just didn't make sense, but that's what's necessary for you to actually grow and change. And a combination of Mary Elaine confronting these issues and me finally letting them sink in and finally letting her into a place where I could grow and I could heal is the reason why we continued. It's why we are where we are today. And it all started with self-awareness. If you don't identify what's going on with yourself, if you continue to push it off, if you continue to compartmentalize and put layers over top of it, eventually it's going to come out. And it may not boil out when you're 20 or 30. It may happen when you're 40 or 50 or 60. But you can't keep that stuff in. Eventually you have to face your demons, and eventually you have to face your shortcomings. And a lot of those things you can grow from. The things that you experience in your service that change you, like all experiences change people, that isn't necessarily forever. But you have to take the step to identify what that is and be willing to accept you've changed. And it may not be for a positive, in a positive way. And the last thing is execute. We have made so many mistakes in our life, but the one thing we were always willing to do was to jump in and execute. Talking about it, philosophizing about it, complaining about it, you must execute. So that's what we learned through that journey, and keeping each other accountable. It is a constant thing that we go through. It's not, oh, we checked that box, we've moved on. It's constantly being accountable for each other.
Yes, and later on, we learned some really important tools for communication. And, no one's born being a good communicator. Maybe some people have natural tendencies to communicate well, but learning specific tools together and holding each other accountable to practicing those tools and putting a name on that tool really helped us through this period of growth. And I was very fortunate. One of my first clients, his name's Nick Cirillo. Feel free to look him up. He has an entire business that focuses on helping organizations develop their culture and communication skills. And he had these tools and these, and I learned it through osmosis. And then we also, when we started our business in we were babies in business, like a couple months old, we brought him down to Savannah and he hosted a workshop with other entrepreneurs in the area and taught us these tools. And a light bulb went off for us. We're like, why don't we equip our team from day one on how to use these tools? And so we put it in our orientation, and we practiced it every single day. And the biggest obstacle we have to overcome is distance, right? Every person on our team is remote. We span from Georgia all the way to California. So how do you develop a close relationship? How do you overcome those obstacles of communication? We could have an interview and say, okay, yeah, this person seems like they're a great communicator, but how do we get them to buy into our culture and then also meet them where they're at and give them the tools and the skills to be able to grow as a communicator? So that's what we did.
Yeah, and so to kind of take you back to the origin of how we got into the business we're in, so we started to grow from kind of breaking down, and then we started working on what's the next thing going on in our life that's creating friction in our relationship. And we were burnt out. Mary Elaine is a full-time teacher, 2 young kids, my lifestyle, and it just wasn't sustainable for us. And she found the opportunity through a friend to work in this remote setting. And I'll let you talk a little bit.
Okay. So like he said, one of the things we've never been afraid to do is just execute. If we start complaining about something in our life, we're going to jump in and make a change. We make a plan, and then we're going to do it. We've never been really afraid to make that change. So, it was just not what we envisioned for our life, for me to be this burnout, for us to have this weight over our home, constantly stressed, no time for anything. I couldn't be really, truly present for my own kids. So when I learned about virtual assisting, I said, you know what, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it this summer. If I hate it, I can go back teaching or find something else. And so I did. And the change it made in our home, it was palpable. I mean, a weight was lifted from our home. I was able to pivot very quickly and easily whenever military life throws another curveball at you and another change. It was no big deal if one of my kids had a fever in the middle of the night. I didn't have to make all these huge elaborate plans to make sure my class was taken care of. And then I felt guilty because someone else was teaching my class, and none of that existed anymore. It was all gone. And it didn't take long for that light bulb to go off in our head of, this is absolutely perfect for a military family. And so many of our friends really suffered from those same experiences, trauma, exhaustion, and just high stress lifestyle. And then so many of my friends didn't have a job. They wanted to work, but they couldn't find anything that suited their skills or was going to be able to adapt and be flexible or understanding of the military life. So we got to work. We saw that need for our friends, for people that we've known for the entire time that I've known you, and we decided let's do something about it. So we created our business based on the success that I had working for myself, and we got to work on intentionally building the culture and sense of community that we have. So for once, Our team has something outside in the military that they can call their own. It's another purpose. And they have people who just get it. They get it. And we're there for them. We know when their husbands leave, we know when they come back, we know the names of their kids and their dogs, and we care. We care on a much deeper level because it's us. We've been there. We know what it's like to be right there in your shoes. And it has, the stories we hear on how it's changing lives is what keeps us motivated to keep going and to continue to want to grow. So some of these are just words from people on our team, and I'm not going to read them. Feel free to look at there up in bold, but one of the things that pointed out to me was the motivating environment has pushed me to grow personally as well. And I feel more confident because of the skills Patriot Advantage has helped me develop. And that is one thing that we really believe in, is nurturing that whole person.
So yeah, we felt a true obligation. Like you said, we wanted to create this environment. It's a lot like what we're doing here, right? You're giving people an opportunity to come together who understand each other in the same walks of life. And spouses are the most underappreciated service members out there. They take on everything, and they do it without anyone giving them a second look, without anyone thanking them. They suffer silently in the background, and they deserve an opportunity to have independence, to contribute, and to have a life other than they're just the spouse of a service member who drags them all around the country. And we feel incredibly humbled to have an opportunity to create that for them. So as she talked about, we kind of perfect timing. We knew communication was going to be one of our biggest barriers, right? So everyone is scattered across the country. We're not physically seeing everyone every day. We have to be very intentional with our communication with these people. And then they need to be very intentional with their communication with clients to make this work. A lot of people aren't comfortable hiring somebody that they've never met before. But they're a real person. They're a real person out there that's going to develop a real relationship with you. So Nick came down, he taught us this set of communication skills, and we want to quickly share them with you. We are not experts on this. We strive every day working to improve, but it's become kind of our battle drills for communication. When your communication is not having the desired impact that you want, it gives you a step-by-step thing to look at and say, where am I messing up on, and how can I do better? So once we go over the tools, that's when we are going to come back to you all as the audience, and we are going to ask you to think about that situation that we talked about at the beginning. And if you could share and give us examples of how possibly these tools could have helped either you or that other person in your communication mix-up. So, let me start?
Sure.
So intention versus impact. This is pretty much why all the other tools exist. They exist to support that. When you are communicating with somebody and they are just not getting what you're saying, something that we struggled with in our relationship pretty much for years, and something that we continue to work for. And the military is very good at teaching a tactic for this. It's called bottom line up front. And I'm sure many of you have used it in your emails. And what you're doing is you're saying up front, this is my intention. This is what I want you to take away from it. So if I get mixed up in my words and everything else, this is your key takeaway. And that's a very, very important skill set that the military has taught us. And it's something that as soon as I told Mary Elaine about it, she was like, oh, it's brilliant. That's something we even stated in our business. So intention versus impact. And when you are not getting the impact that you're looking for, then you revert back to these other tools, and I figure out, where have I missed here?
Sure. All right, so 745-48, it's all about the words that you're speaking, 7% of the words, and then 45 and 48 refer to your body language and tone of voice. Tone of voice is a huge, simply changing the tone of your voice can greatly have a change on the impact that you make. And that is something that was actually a huge trigger for me, because you could deliver the exact same message and just change your tone, and I would have been way more receptive in a situation. Yeah.
And so the way you translate conversation is it's only 7% of the words you speak. Everything else is coming off of when I take what you're saying and internalize it in my head, and I come out with a translation. It's 45% of it is based off of body language, and then 48 off of tone. And this is something that I struggle with significantly transferring into the civilian sector, because in the military, your tone doesn't really matter, neither does your body language. Everyone can imagine that NCO that's up there with the command hand in somebody's face, letting them know what they've done wrong. But that doesn't work anywhere else. And it's a bad habit to break. My wife's helping me break it, because quite often my command hand will come out and talk about a trigger.
Yeah, I would say get your command hand out of here. Okay, so data tracking and meaning making. This has everything to do with the stories that you're making up in your head. You're presented with what is the data, and then you interpret a why in your head as to what occurred. I have a really embarrassing story. Brett insisted I share this with you, and here we go. All right, so it was a Friday morning, and Brett got up early in the morning to go to work. And I got the kids ready, got them out the door, and I'm back home and I'm working. And I typically will text him or call him if something pops up with PA, and he can answer pretty quickly. But I wasn't getting a reply. And this went on for a while, and I'm just like, come on, I need this answer. Like, I just need you to answer this. And we can track it. Most of you have iPhones, I'm sure. We have shared each other's location for years, so it's like a safety mechanism. If I'm on the road with the kids, whatever, I can track each other. So we're just used to, if I know when he's coming home from work, whatever. I look at where he's at, and I see this little dot in the middle of the water off our island, just floating in the river. And I'm like, that asshole. He didn't go to work. He literally had this day off, and he went fishing and didn't tell me. And I've just got mad, and I'm calling him, I'm texting him, and he wasn't answering me. And I just get more and more mad. I'm like, why would he do that to me? Why would he lie to me? First of all, I've never complained about you going, I'm fishing. Like, I'm a cool wife. Like, I'm like, all right, cool, go. And I was seething. I was so mad he wasn't answering.
The reality is, and I have another job outside of PA, they took a fishing trip as a morale building experience. And Elaine and I had talked about it. It was actually in our calendar. But that's what we do when we don't have all the data. We fill in that gap with a story. And it is very important to be aware of that in yourself, and then aware of how your communication can create meaning making with someone else. Because generally speaking, it's a lot of times we put a negative spin when we start meaning making. Mm-hmm. Next one is my truth, my experience. So just because you experience something does not mean somebody else experiences it the same way. And one of the biggest mistakes that we make, I make this quite often, is we make blanket statements. I experienced something one or two times, and that means it's always the way it is. So, for example, this is quite the trigger in our household. Mary Elaine leaves a bowl next to the couch, for example. I've quite often made the mistake of saying, you never clean up your dishes. Once again, we go back to intention and impact, and I assure you it does not have the impact that is desired. And it's not true, right? But
Which my response is, oh yeah? Well, you never pick up your clothes off the floor. And then we start that back.
So especially when you start looking in a business setting and you are trying to encourage people to give you ideas and to challenge the status quo, you can use this at the beginning of your statements. In my experience, it is best to do something this way, not it's best to do it this way, because that shuts down everybody else around you. Nobody else is going to want to put in their input. If you want to create an environment with open communication, it's a great tool, and it's just a simple thing that you can start out your sentence with. In my experience, this is what has worked best. Inside out, outside in. This is another one that I struggle with. And part of it's my personality, but part of it's what the military does. The military tries to instill confidence in you. It tries to bring you out of your shell, make you make decisions, make you speak up. So for me, I am 100% inside out. If there's a gap in a conversation or someone's not making a decision, I'm ready to jump in. But that, once again, also shuts other people down. So it's having the self-awareness of knowing, hey, every once in a while, I need to practice some patience and listen to what other people say. But also you can identify it in your coworkers and the people that are around you. If you know somebody is going to lead, generally try to dominate a conversation, then you can encourage them to listen more, and you can encourage those other people and give them the opportunity to speak up. And that's going to continue to help create open lines of communication within your business.
Okay, sure. I statements. This one's pretty common, but this is another way to kind of disarm people. If you come into the conversation of just starting sentence, I need you to take out the trash, please, versus go take out the trash. That delivery is just going to be received a lot better by starting with an I.
And the last one is moose in the room. And this is another one where I think military people are going to thrive, especially when you start talking in the civilian sector, is you can't let issues go unidentified. So my experience in the military and Ranger Battalion was nothing's off limits, right? Nothing's safe. You never make a mistake where someone's not going to tell you you screwed up. Most of the time, usually in a very demeaning way. But in my experience, both in our business and in the construction industry of all places, people don't like calling out the moose in the room. People will whisper about it in the corner. There's something going on, but nobody wants to step up and identify that. That can make you wildly successful. If you can have the courage to step up and identify issues using tools to where people are going to receive it well, it can be a very powerful thing for your success. And it's something that we not only embrace in ourselves, we encourage people that work for us to do the same. They need to speak up. They need to have the courage, and they have the courage because we all communicate the same way. We have these battle drills, and we present them to them, and that gives them the confidence to come up to a president or a vice president and say, I see an issue with our process, and this is how I think we can change it. Yeah. It gives them the confidence, but it has to be received, and that reception goes into all these other tools that we've outlined here.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to accountability as well. We empower our team to say, hey, you can call me out if I'm not practicing safe space. You can call me out if I'm not using some of these tools. Feel free to do that. And for them to hear that and, for us to mutually have that understanding and mutually hold each other accountable, it just opens the opportunity for issues to be addressed.
And once again, these are not our ideas. These were passed down from us, and they were passed down from a man named Rudy Mick. His website's right there at the bottom. And you can go in on his website, explore more of the examples that he has. But those are our battle drills. Those are our battle drills that we use in our relationship. Those are the ones that we use with our children. And those are the ones that we have built our business on. And for us, it has been extremely successful.
Mm-hmm. All right. So remember that time in the beginning we told you to think about something that happened, it made you angry. So what I want you to do is take that situation, turn to someone around you, describe what it was that happened, and then think of, actually we can go back to, can you swipe to the previous tool? Yeah. Try to identify where did it go south? What could you have done to course correct that situation? What could have that other person done to course correct the situation? And then hopefully someone can share. Good.
So we found the most courageous man in the room. No. All right, Brian.
So I travel a lot for business. I was on a plane Tuesday evening, right about sundown. And I don't know if you've ever been in that seat where the window's open, it hits on the wing, and man, it's coming, and it's right in your eyes. I mean, this is just awful. I mean, you can't see. And there's a lady over there sitting there, and she's moving the shade up and down, up and down. And I'm like, can you please just lower that, just until the plane moves? And I mean, it's literally about to blind me, and I can't look away from it. There's nowhere I can go. The plane's starting to taxi. She's looking at me. She's like, no, I want my window open. I got to see. I'm Like, okay, well, okay, thank you, lady. And you know, we eventually moved on. But, you know, my truth, my experience, you know, she was probably really anxious about flying. You know, when you think about it, she wasn't, I don't think, intentionally trying to be an asshole. But, yeah, but why assume that about somebody? Because that only hurts me. You know, that doesn't hurt her. She goes on with her life, and she can continue to be an asshole if she wants to. But having a negative reaction hurts me, not her. So, you know, that's mine.
Thank you, Brian. Woo, Brian. Woo. Does anybody else out there want to share? I would love to hear a female's perspective on the topic. No? No, all you battle-hardened gunfighters out there, nobody wants to get up, be a little vulnerable for a minute? Oh, yes.
There we go.
Let's do this, Barber.
Huh?
Stephen Barber, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I've got one. So it kind of goes with relationships, but also business. So I employ all women. I have 6, 7 women that work for me. Not necessarily, but it's kind of worked out, and they're great. They're awesome. So
I've worked with all men and I've worked with all women, and you found the key to success. That's all I'm saying.
no, well, I think women, when you're, well, there's a lot to it, but I think they're great, and they definitely, they're very intuitive. So at some point, you know, I can't hide how pissed off I am. Like, it doesn't matter what I say; they just all know, and they're just like, we can feel it, and I'm like, damn it. Because they're right, but then I don't really have to address it all the time. But the thing I was going to say is kind of along those lines. One of the big aha moments, both in my marriage, which was early on, and then I've seen it with the ladies that I work with, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with women only, but it happens more often. But I think as a veteran too, even with civilian other men that are civilians, the uncomfortable thing of like I get really frustrated. And then they get really, really frustrated because what they're feeling is not logical. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so I used to get really, really angry and really frustrated with my wife or my employees or what, because it just like I'm mad at them or I'm not, I said something or something happened but the way they're reacting isn't logical to me. It doesn't make sense. So then I'm just dismissing it completely. Or I'm looking over it, I'm not really addressing it. I'm like, that makes no sense. But the thing I had to learn, especially in marriage, was that doesn't matter at all. Like, just because I don't understand it does not make that person's feelings any less real. Because sometimes they even know that it's illogical or they shouldn't be this angry or sad or mad or whatever. But that doesn't mean that the way they're feeling isn't actually happening. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, it's not that it's still valid, it's still real. They can't do anything about it, so you still have to address it, no matter how much it makes sense to me or not. And in marriage, that was a huge, huge thing that eventually was like, oh, okay, all right. So I think it's the only reason I'm still married is to the same person, because I finally realized, like, just because the way she's feeling makes no sense to me, that doesn't make it any less real. And there were times where she's like, I understand that what I'm feeling right now makes no sense. It doesn't even make sense to me. But that's not changing the fact that I'm really, really angry or really sad or whatever. So those feelings have to be addressed. And in my employees, that's helped a lot of preventing things from getting bigger and bigger. Because I don't know how many times I've had that conversation with one that is mad at another person, and she's like, well, yeah, she shouldn't, but she shouldn't feel that way. Well, it doesn't matter what she should or shouldn't feel. She still feels it. Like, so you have to address it. You have to accept that. And the same thing with me and my employees too. So.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's intention impact. And if someone's not getting what you're trying to convey to them, your job as a leader is to make sure that they do. It's not, you can blame them, you can say, like I said, it doesn't make sense, but your job is to get your message across in a digestible manner. And that's what we use these tools for. So I think we're going to wrap up. Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Yeah. Can we get a round of applause? Once again, we really appreciate the opportunity to come here and share some of our story. This is actually the first time we have publicly talked about some of the more intimate aspects of our journey. And I think it was a good experience for us kind of talking through it. And we saw some perspectives that we didn't know each other had during different periods. And I apologize if we got a little long-winded, but I love you.
Thank you.